Hello and welcome back to Geek and Speak, the Geek and Seek podcast. Today, we're asking the question, what's the deal with tutors in Commander specifically? So, tutors, as you may or may not know, are just cards that you can play to go find other cards. And there's a lot of varying degrees on that as far as power level, what those cards can find. And we're going to be talking about the impact on the Commander format when it comes to tutors. So, hi, I am your host, Morgan. Joined with me today is Jason. Jason, how's it going? Besides the last 2 hours.
We won't get into it. I had a mess to clean up. It was not fun. But other than that, doing all right. Not too bad.
Good. You got to play some golf? Are you good at golf?
I'm a lot better than I was.
That's
I'm
good.
a lot better than I was, and it's something I enjoy doing. I have fun with. I don't get to do this very often, but I've been able to play golf the last 3 days, and when you're able to play consistently, anyone who's like played golf and tried to get good at or better or good at golf will tell you that like the more consistent that you could play, the more days you play. Like if you could play rounds in a row, you just do a lot better because it's a lot more time to work on whatever it is you're struggling with.
It's fun because like my literal backyard, like right across my fence, is a driving course. And so like my dog will just sometimes start barking at people who are just, it's pretty amusing. But also joined with us today is Preston. Preston, how's it going, man?
Good. Compared to what you two have been putting up with, my life is pretty peachy at the moment.
Glad to hear it, bud. Genuinely happy that you are not struggling.
I'm not as bad as Jason, really. I'm just I'm moderately stressed out about being a little bit behind on video editing. As some of you may notice, the last week of our release schedule has been a little poopy, and that's mostly my own fault. But life happens, so it'd be like that. But before we get into our topic, let me say that if you would like to support Geek and Seek, whether that be our gameplay series, this podcast, the other things we have going on, you can head over to patreon.com/geekandseek YouTube. People who join us on Patreon are obviously supporting the show, but they're also able to hop in our Discord and hang out, talk magic, which has been fun with new Outlaws of Thunder Junction previews coming out. And then if you can't support us financially, that's fine. You can also help us out a lot by engaging with our videos on YouTube, liking the videos, leaving comments, any kind of comment, really. You can LOL at something that someone said. You can leave an insightful piece of commentary about whatever we're talking about. And then you can also just check out our other videos. We have like over 200 videos now. So lots of stuff for you to check out. And then let's also look at my favorite comment from the week. This is from last week's podcast episode where we were talking about cards that we like but don't play. One of the cards that Jason had mentioned was Mirror Entity. And this comment is from Burning Paper Sun 1. I've run Mirror Entity in my Rin and Siri deck as a poor man's Craterhoof. And that's great. That's brilliant.
It really is. I mean, what's Craterhoof? 6?
Craterhoof, I think, is 8 mana.
Oh, 8. Wow.
Now, granted,
Craterhoof 5 and 3 green.
I think so. That sounds right. But the main thing that makes Craterhoof so good is that it gives trample.
Right.
Whereas Mirror Entity does not. But I mean, if you're going wide and you're just like Mirror Entity, like let's say you pay the same amount of mana, right? The 4 mana for Mirror Entity, I think, and then you pay 4, into its ability, and you turn all your 1/1 tokens into 4/4s. That's basically Craterhoof, man. I mean, you don't have the trample, but
If you pay the same amount of mana as Craterhoof, which you could do, because realistically, by the time you're activating Mirror Entity to do something like that, you have 8 mana available to you. You put 8 mana into that, you turn everything into an 8/8, and now it's like, whoa. Four 1/1s or 4 2/2s are nowhere near as bad as 4 8/8s.
Right. Yeah. And he's serious about the poor man's Craterhoof.
Yes.
Because Mirror Entity is
75 cents versus 27.
Right, yeah. So big difference.
And like, the one thing there is green decks can't utilize it, but Selesnya decks can.
Mm-hmm.
And Naya.
And funny enough, I talked about how I don't play this card very often. In the deck that Tommy built me for Christmas, Othari, it has Mirror Entity in it. And I'll just share this with the viewers. I recently actually won a game out of nowhere because I put it onto the battlefield and I was like, wait a minute, I can do some tricky stuff with this. And then I swung. The right amount of creatures didn't get blocked, and so I was like, all right, I'm gonna make all my creatures. Well, I don't even remember. I think I made them all 4/4s, 5/5s. They were 4/4s, I think. Yeah, and just kind of won out of nowhere. You guys were there. You saw that happen.
It's pretty neat. It's a tricky card. I like it. Yeah. So if you're not playing Mirror Entity, it's worth playing, especially because it's like 50 cents or whatever. As far as news goes, we didn't want to. There's some stuff we could talk about where we're not going to. The only thing we're really going to talk about is Outlaws of Thunder Junction previews has been going on for a week now, and there's a lot of really spicy things coming up. We will be having an episode dedicated to our favorite cards from the set. There'll be episode 44 of our podcast, which is coming out in, I think, 2 weeks, so April 17th. So tune in for that if you want to hear like what all of our absolute favorite cards are from the set. But there's one card specifically I wanted to talk to you guys about. Jason, I tagged you in this in Discord. Did you see the new Obeka?
I did see that. I did see this. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I'm so
Preston,
glad
could you read this card for us real quick?
Yeah, I can read it. All right, it's Obeka, Splitter of Seconds. 1, a blue, a black, and a red for a 2/5 legendary creature Ogre Warlock. She has Menace, and whenever she deals combat damage to a player, you get that many additional upkeep steps after this phase.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god.
It's so cool.
That's so silly. I love it. I love it. Make her a 10/10, get 10 upkeeps.
Yeah. Yeah. So you don't get like an untap step, you don't get a draw step. It's only the upkeep. But that does mean that like anything that's like at the beginning of your upkeep, do this. That means you get that again. So like, you know, maybe the most obvious one is like Phyrexian Arena. So you do this, and then you get to
No, from someone who plays Obeka.
Yeah, Jason has an actual Obeka deck, which is the main reason I wanted to make sure he saw this.
Let me tell you the card that I'm the most excited for.
While you're looking that up, I will say something that's really fun with the new Obeka is that it works with suspend. So like time counter stuff. Like if you're trying to play those cards fairly, you can just you can tick them down faster by getting additional upkeeps. That's kind of a fun thing you can do with it too. That I think it's just going to be like one of those fun commanders. Like if you just like go through your collection, it's like at the beginning of my upkeep I do this, neat. Like just jam a bunch of those cards.
Are Saga's upkeep?
No, they happen. I think it's after your draw step, but let me actually just look up. I believe it's after your draw step.
Okay.
Dang, I'm trying to.
After your draw step is when Saga's trigger. Oh, okay, here's the card. For 2 blue, Psychic Vortex, enchantment, cumulative upkeep, draw a card. At the end of each of your turns, sacrifice a land and discard your hand. So in original Obeka, you can just end the turn, so you don't have to worry about the end of turn clause. But I guess it probably is decent with new Obeka.
No, here's why it's really good with new Obeka as well. Like if you want to just run new Obeka as the commander, because you don't have to pay the upkeep cost. So if you make Obeka really big, like let's say you make her an 8/8, you know, or I mean she's 2/5, so you make her an 8/10 or something like that. You just make her really big, and she hits somebody. Like let's say even if I mean she's got menace, so she's gonna hit somebody probably. You get 8 upkeeps, so now you paid 4 mana to get 8 cards, or actually you would do 7 cards, and then you just don't pay the upkeep cost on the last upkeep trigger, and then it goes away. So you paid 4 mana. So because you don't have you have the choice to pay it or not, and you just say I'm not going to draw the card and pay the upkeep cost, and this is going to go away.
Well, you actually wouldn't draw 7 cards. You draw like
30. You would draw way more than that because it's cumulative, because it stacks. Yeah. So the first time you draw 1, the second time you draw 2,
insane.
The third time you would draw 3. So that's 6 cards after 3 draws.
I do like the idea of just like making her huge, like with like equipments or enchantments, just making her huge. And then you get, because even if you just get 2 upkeeps, it's like nice. But if you get like 6 upkeeps or something crazy, you're like, we cooking, dog.
Yeah.
yeah. There's,
dude,
that card's sweet.
if this had white in it, first of all, it can't have white in it. It can't. But if this had white in it, I just imagine like a Felidar Sovereign.
Yeah. That'd be really easy if you just like some kind of life gainy shenanigans.
Yeah, that would be fun. That would be fun. But I'm definitely
who would ever play life gain?
I'm definitely gonna put this in Obeka. When I get my hands on it, it's going in Obeka for sure.
Yeah, so tune in a couple weeks where we're talking about our favorite cards from the set. There's a good chance that this is going to be on one of our lists. I don't know, though. There's a lot of spicy stuff in this set. So
might talk about this one as like an honorable mention because we've already talked about it a little bit here. It's so cool, though. There's so many fun I'm just going to be looking at all the cool upkeep things that you can do with this card. I also kind of like, I don't know why. Part of me in my head wishes that it had something to do with split second cards. Like, it doesn't have to, but just because it's the name.
Yeah, I guess the name would make it flavorful somewhat. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and hop into our main topic for the day. So again, we are talking about tutors in Commander. So, what is a tutor? A tutor is a card that you play to go find a different card. And there are varying degrees. There are, so the name tutor comes from OG tutor, demonic tutor. Then we also have an old school vampiric tutor. And these are kind of like the templates for like the best tutors. Demonic tutor is for 1 and a black. It's a sorcery. You go find any card in your deck and you put it in your hand. And then vampiric tutor is only 1 black mana and it's an instant. However, it goes on top of your deck instead of your hand, and you lose 2 life. But these 2 cards are like the template for these are the best tutors. Now, the main thing that we're going to be talking about is what does that do to Commander? Because part of the charm of Commander is you're supposed to be able to play all these jankety cards that you don't really have other homes for in like competitive play. And because it's a singleton format, you have a lot of diversity in your games. Your games are less likely to play the same way. So the fact that you are adding excessive amounts of consistency to your game, I feel like to a lot of people, that might be ruining the spirit of Commander. I have a lot of thoughts on this, and we have some mini sections that we are going to dive into and dissect a little bit more. But before we get too deep in the weeds, what are your guys' initial reactions to a statement like that?
So for me, I don't necessarily think that it ruins the spirit because it's a singleton format. You're able to find 1 card. It's not like you pull 1 card out of your deck with the tutor. This it's not always just going to be a card that like immediately wins you the game right then and there. And I feel like that's a lot of what people worry about is, you're just tutoring for the best thing in your deck and you're going to win the game here. It's like, well, not necessarily. Tutoring for the best thing for me in this situation. And honestly, I think that especially since we have so many cards in our decks, 99 cards is a lot. being able to search for something when you need it, searching for that removal spell when you need it to save yourself from dying or save a creature that you need to, searching for a board wipe to save the table. Being able to have those answers, it's nice and it's useful in a format that has so many cards. So I don't really think that it ruins the spirit. Now, in the competitive area, tutors serve a different purpose. There are cards that you're either going to use this right away to go get your fast mana, to get your mana crypts or your mana vault or whatever, or you're going to save it in your hand until you have the Thassa's Oracle. Now I just need the Demonic Consultation. That's in competitive. They do different. I mean, it's the same card, but they serve a different purpose. So in casual Commander, I think that they're fine.
Yeah, before Preston gives his answer, I guess I should have said this at the beginning too, is that we're not really talking about CEDH, because in CEDH, like that format is taking the restraints in the rule set of Commander and pushing it to its just the most extreme it can go, like pushing it as far as it can go and seeing what they can do. To me, that is barely Commander. Like, it is, but it's its own animal, it's its own beast, and that's not how most people enjoy Commander. So that's not really what we're talking about. Like Jason said, like in CEDH, you're using your Vampiric or your Demonic Tutors or whatnot to go find your combo piece to win the game. That's basically what you're always doing, and it's not abnormal in CEDH to win before turn 4, which is not what most people want out of their Commander games. But so I probably should have said that at the beginning. But Preston, any further thoughts on Singleton and Tutors?
I obviously can't judge too harshly because I have my Light Paws deck, which is just tutors the deck basically.
The tutor the commander.
Yeah, and then I have my Indestruct Avacyn deck, which has a bunch of tutors in it to go find Crucible of Worlds. So like I do run tutors in my decks, and obviously land tutors are a big one. If you have the option for land tutors, you probably run them in your decks. But I think it just depends on how some people use them. Because I've seen people play casual Commander, but will use their tutors as if they are trying to win a competitive game. And that's not really fun in my opinion. But if you are just being more casual, picking what I want for the specific moment, that I'm totally fine with.
Jason, you're muted.
Did I hear you right, Preston? You tutor up Crucible of Worlds in your Avacyn deck?
Yeah. Or is that the wrong card?
Crucible of Worlds?
I think
the one where you can play lands from your graveyard?
Yeah, no, not that one.
World Slayer.
World Slayer, that's it. Something World. I knew
the one that blows everything up.
Yeah, way worse than Crucible of Worlds. I was like, because
you want to tutor up Crucible of Worlds? I have at it, buddy. Go for it.
I was just thinking
Look
in my
fetch lands.
I was thinking in my head about when I edit this later, and I'm like, Crucible
that can't be right.
Worlds? Why would he? And then I just like, why? What? That's not gonna make sense when it comes on screen. And then I was like, oh no, he means something worse.
I'm terrible at remembering card names.
No, you're just terrible. You're putting World Slayer in a deck and trying to destroy everyone else's stuff.
It is kind of funny.
At least I end the game.
Fair.
Some people do that and they don't plan on ending the game.
Fair.
I guess the only thing I would add we'll get more into specific kinds of tutors. Like Preston had mentioned, there's like Light Paws, which only tutors for auras. There's Land Ramp and stuff like that. So we'll get into the specifics of that. But in the sense of just broad, grab whatever the heck you need tutors, I don't love those in Commander, at least on the casual level, because you could say that there is the most casual version of that, which is it's going to show up, and I'm just going to do like what Jason said and just grab the best card in my situation. The board's looking really bad. I need to go find my board wipe. I'm going to go find my board wipe. All right, cool. Have at it. Or my hand's looking real small. Top deck your tutor. I'm going to go find something that's going to draw me some cards. Or, there are those kind of situations. Or I'll admit, I've done this. Tutor for a land. Yeah, I missed my land drop. I'm going to go find a land. Sometimes that happens. No one's happy to do it, but you got to stay in the game. So, that is like the fair thing to do with these grab whatever the heck tutors, right? But the problem is like, even on the casual level, like even if you have no infinite combos in your deck, I feel like they're usually even too good then, even if you don't have infinites in your deck or like some kind of way to just win the game outright. Because even if most decks, even at the casual level, have one or two cards that they're like, when you're brewing your deck, you're like, I always want this card. If I have this card, my likelihood of winning the game goes up exponentially. Even if it's not a combo piece, you're just like, if I have this card, it's very hard for me to lose. Almost all casual decks have one or two cards like that. When you're deck building and you're making cuts or additions to your deck, you're like, I'm never cutting this card because it's the best card. And most of the time, that's what your tutor target is. Like, even if you're like, oh, I could forward wipe, or oh, I could draw some cards, you're like, no, I'm going to grab my card. That's probably going to win me the game. And then at that point, that's just the casual version of the CEDH thing, which is you're grabbing your combo pieces. This is just like the chilled down version of that. And I don't love that. At least at the 1 or 2 mana slot, like Vampiric and Demonic Tutor. So let me ask you guys, what if we make them worse? All right. What if we go, instead of the 1 or 2 mana, now you have to pay like, I don't know. There's like Beseech the Queen, which depending on your deck is anywhere from 3 to 6 mana. Or there's the more simple version, which is Diabolic Tutor, which is Demonic Tutor, except it's twice as much mana. What if we go to that level where you're having to spend so much more mana on them? Does that make them more fair? Or is it still kind of dumb?
Yeah, I'm fine with them once they start getting to that mana price. Like, if you're paying 4 mana, you're probably not going to also play the other card most of the time, I feel like. Like, there's going to be at least one turn for most people in most games. So I'm definitely fair. I'm definitely fine with like the 4 and 5 cost ones. The 1 and 2 drops are that's a little much for casual Commander.
See, I think that if you start pushing tutors into that area, then that they're going to become what you don't want them to become. If they become so big, like mana, like costly, people are just going to save them and just tutor up their combo pieces of the cards that are going to win them the game, instead of just tutoring up stuff like that they need in a certain situation. Because it's like, all right, this card's 4 mana, it's going to take a good amount of what I can do this turn just to play it. I'm going to save it until I can get me the card that's going to win me the game. And if that's what you're trying to avoid, I think that making them bad, so to speak, as comparatively to Vampiric and Demonic, I don't think that's. But I'm of the opinion that Vampiric and Demonic are fine. I think that they're okay. It's especially in Commander.
Wait, so you think that you're like more likely to be doing degenerate stuff if you're playing like the 4 to 5 mana tutors instead of the 1 and 2 mana tutors? What are you talking about?
You're more likely to tutor up your combo pieces if it costs you more mana to search for them. I'm not spending 4 mana to tutor for a land. I don't care how desperate I am. I'm not playing a 4 mana ramp spell that doesn't even put it onto the battlefield. Puts it in my hand. It's not even on the battlefield. I'm not doing that. I'm not tutoring for a Soul Ring. I'm not paying 4 mana to tutor up a Soul Ring. I've tutored up a Soul Ring with a Demonic Tutor before. I've done it. So, if I have to pay 4 mana every single time I play that spell, I'm going to really think about it and be like, what is a better option than my card that's going to win me the game with this, like, That's just how I see it. If you make them more expensive to play, then they're only going to be used for degenerate things. Because why would you spend so much mana if you're not going to go grab your win con?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I will say that I guess they've kind of given their opinions on tutors. I don't run like super specific tutors very often. I do have some tutors in like my life swap deck because it's a jank deck, and then I have them in my CEDH deck. But like, just on a playability standpoint, it goes down so much when you go past Vampiric and Demonic. As far as these like flexible ones go, I do have Beseech the Mirror in a deck, and just there's some fun things you can do with it. Beseech the Queen, I would maybe play in a mono black deck because it's in a mono black deck. It's effectively only 3 mana instead of 6. Dark Petition's pretty sick. It's 5 mana sorcery, but if you have 2 or more instants and sorceries in your graveyard, you get a Dark Ritual effect when it resolves. So then it plays just kind of like it's only 2 mana. I'm just kind of skimming through tutors right now that are open-ended, and honestly, some of these are plenty playable. Or Grim Tutor, which is the 3 mana, lose 3 life on any card. I only have that in one deck ever, and that is my life swap deck because I want to get my life low. And it's, like I said, I have some tutors in there because it's jank. But if we're being honest, 3 mana, sorcery speed, lose 3 life, go find a card, that's not good. I don't want to do that. And then when you go up to like Diabolic Tutor and stuff, unplayable. Freaking unplayable. Because like what Preston said, because Diabolic Tutor is like, you're spending the 4 mana on the tutor to go find the card, and especially if you're playing it fairly and you're not trying to combo off or whatever. Because even if you're like playing a combo deck and you're running as many tutors as you can, you're still probably not playing Diabolic Tutor, but I digress. You're spending the 4 mana on the tutor, and then you probably don't have enough mana. Like if you I gotta deal with this board, I gotta find my Farewell, Diabolic Tutor, well, I'm gonna spend almost all my mana on this, and now I won't have the mana for the Farewell. So that's kind of where it's not even like a consistency problem for me when you get to these kind of tutors, like the ones that are a little bit worse, just because they're just borderline unplayable in a lot of decks, or at least most decks.
See, that point what you just brought up though is what I'm talking about. If you pushed every tutor into that 4 mana range, then people aren't going to be able to use them and grab that Farewell when they need to exile all creatures or whatever. They're going to be like, well, I'm going to grab my win con, and hopefully someone else can deal with the board. And if they can, now I'm in a position to win on my turn. That's just, yeah.
You heard it from Geek and Speak, everybody. Jason thinks that Diabolic Tutor is better than Demonic Tutor.
Not what I said. Not what I said at all.
It is insane that for 4 mana you can ignore one of the fundamental rules of the game, and it's considered bad, arguably unplayable. Like, Magic the Gathering is so built around the randomness of the game that cards that completely break it can still somehow be viewed as bad. That's just... I hate tutors.
I wouldn't say that Magic the Gathering was necessarily built on randomness, considering you can have 4 copies of a card in most formats.
Well, yeah, but there's still randomness, right? Like in competitive format, you can more effectively build your decks than you can in Commander, right? Because you have a smaller deck and you can run more copies, right? So you can really hone in on what your strategy is. But there is still so much randomness. Like, if there wasn't randomness, we wouldn't need lands, Jason. You would just have mana, like in Hearthstone or something. You would just have ways to cast your spells. But because of the randomness, you still have to make sure that you're running enough lands, have the right colors of lands. You have to make sure you're hitting things on curve. Randomness is a huge part of Magic. So I do agree with Preston that is kind of funny. That's kind of open-ended tutors is, for the most part, we think that Vampiric and Demonic Tutor are a little bit too strong for the casual level, but never never say never. There are certain situations because I don't know if I made this point, but like if you're just playing like a green, like some kind of stompy deck, and you're just like, I just play a lot of big creatures, and you draw a tutor, you're just like, I guess I'll just go get another big creature. Like in those kind of decks, it's like where there's not like one or two cards that's like, I play this, I win the game. They're probably fine too, but then just why not just play more card draw or something? Anyways, but let's get into and then the slightly worse ones are very specific. Like certain decks might want them, but outside of that, maybe not. What about uber specific tutors, right? So this is going to be your enlightened tutors, right? That grab artifacts and enchantments. This is going to be your rampant growths and cultivates that grab lands. What do you guys think about these kind of tutors?
First of all, I think that ramp and tutors kind of go into two different categories. I do understand why, why a rampant growth could be considered a tutor, a land tutor,
Well, there are just straight up land tutors though, right? There's like expedition map, crop rotation. There's things that are like tempt of discovery, stuff like that.
I wouldn't consider a tutor though, because you have to sacrifice a land, and you don't
to grab your ancient tomb.
But you don't. Okay, well, in that situation, you would go positive on mana. But most of the time, when you do that, you don't end up being positive on mana.
Sure.
Whereas if like a Harrow, for example, that make you're positive on mana then. But I think if I think that Vampiric and Demonic Tutor are totally fine for a casual game, then the super narrow tutors, absolutely. Throw in those mystical tutors, those worldly tutors, throw in all that stuff. That's fine. I don't think that I think that there's for these ones, a card that I really like. This could have been in last week's podcast, but a card that I really like but I don't ever play is Whir of Invention. You know that card?
Oh yeah, it's from Ether Revolt or Kaladesh or something.
It's an artifact tutor. And you
puts it onto the battlefield.
It's like 3 blue and X, and you pay X whatever the card you're tutoring for is mana cost. But it also has improvise.
Yep.
I think cards like that are really, really good.
What about you, Preston? What do you think about these more narrow tutors?
Well, specifically on the discussion of ramp, I feel like there's 3 categories of ramp cards, and each one gets more tutor-like. There's basic land ones, which I have no problem with. There's ones that search for basic land type cards, which are a lot stronger, but I still think pretty reasonable. But then there's the ones that let you get any land, and those might actually be my least favorite type of tutor, besides just the completely open-ended one. I have really started to dislike that specific brand of tutor where you get to find any land, because it's always something degenerate like Field of the Dead, and I'm just sick of it. No, I'm so sick of that card. Honestly, that might be my number 1 banned card in Commander at this point. I hate Field of the Dead.
Here's the thing.
It's so dumb.
Here's the thing. You wouldn't feel that way if in Commander, and this is a topic for another discussion, but if in Commander we didn't hate land destruction so much. Like if we as a format, as players, did not mind our lands getting blown up as much as we do, and I know we all hate it. I'm not saying we all hate it, but if we didn't hate it as much, then cards like Field of the Dead would be fine because people would be running 1 or maybe 2 destroy target land spells in their deck. It would be much more prevalent in the format, and we wouldn't have a big problem with these lands because we would be able to just blow them up.
Yeah.
Yep. I would say to add to the ramp discussion, land ramp is different than normal ramp, right? Because you always have access to ramp. Like even if we go back to like Alpha, like OG Magic, we have, mana rocks, right? All colors, all color combinations have access to mana rocks. That is ramp. the downside of playing like Soul Ring, Talismans, Signets, stuff like that, is that they're prone to artifact removal, right? That's the downside. But the upside is that you can ramp. Land ramp was kind of the same thing. Like what Green's thing was that it could specifically ramp via lands. But they balanced that by having land destruction. Like even in old Magic sets, we had targeted land destruction, Armageddon, things like that. That's how you balanced it out. But I think part of it's because that Commander players are just filthy casuals, but people cry when you touch their lands. Like I think it's different if you use your Field of Ruin or something to blow up my Field of the Dead. If you do something like that, it's like, all right, I get it. Or someone has a Gaia's. Yeah, or you use your Beast Within. You use your Beast Within on my Gaia's Cradle. Like, I get it. Okay, I get it.
And by the way, if you're one of those people out there and you complain when your Gaia's Cradle gets blown up, if it had just made you anything less or anything more than 3 mana, if your Gaia's Cradle made you 3 or more mana, you have no right to be upset that it got destroyed. Name one other land that gives you 3 mana almost for doing nothing. Like, you have to have creatures on the battlefield, sure. But, I mean, even like Lotus Field, you have to sacrifice 2 lands.
Unless you stifle the trigger.
Yeah.
Big brain.
I do agree with you, Jason, but I think it's funny you think anyone with a Gaia's Cradle is watching this video. They're not.
Wait a minute. Why not? Proxies.
Yeah.
Why not?
I guess, but...
No, proxies. I advocate for proxies. We advocate for proxies here.
We do. And I think people know this, but just so it's out there, like, we do sometimes use proxies on upkeep. Like, we don't very often, but we do sometimes for one reason or another. So, that's where we're at proxies. We're not like gung-ho proxy everything, but we're like, sometimes whatever. Here's something else about the land thing, though, that people don't talk about, is that it's somewhat acceptable to blow up the really problematic lands, right? But the second you use your land destruction on something that's like not a game-ending threat, like you blow up someone's bounce land, or someone's like, oh, I finally hit a green mana source, and you just like, all right, I'm gonna blow up your pointless little guild gate or something just to keep them off colors or whatever. Like the second you do that, it's like, oh, how dare you? It's like, well, I'm trying to win the game. But also,
did you just justify? Did you just try to justify blowing up somebody's only source of one certain color of mana?
I have done that, and it didn't win me the game anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Okay, I'm sorry, Jason. You're not the bad person in this call anymore. Play all the tutors you want.
God.
It's funny. No, okay. No, here's my real point, though. The two decks that are very likely to play cards like that anyways are landfall decks, right? But in landfall decks, a lot of those decks are going to have ways to loop lands, right? So they're going to have their Crucible of Worlds or their Ramunap Excavators, whatever, so that they can get lands back from their graveyard. So if you're wasting some resource to get rid of a problematic land, there's a decent chance they can get it back. If not, they at least have like Balaged Recovery or Regrowth or Eternal Witness or something in order to get it back. And if they really need it, they likely will have the way to do it. Worse, though, is the just go crazy green and Simic decks, which they're just like on turn 5, they have 12 mana, and it's all in basic lands because they're playing Rampant Growth, Cultivate, Kodama's Reach. They don't need a lot of non-basic lands. They just vomited out all of their basics. So then most of your land destruction doesn't do anything. So basically, we just gave green immunity to keeping them in check. Like all of the other colors and color combinations, you keep them in check by their ramp being touchable. But in green, we kind of said like, no, it's fine. Go ahead, go crazy, green. And that just seems wrong. No, it's not true. So all that to say is I think we should normalize land destruction. If you have a backup plan, don't just crack your Armageddon just out of spite or whatever. Don't do that. Have a plan. But like, we need to have more ways to keep those green decks in check. So all that to say is I don't really like land ramp. I will say that the ones that like grab basic lands are obviously the least offensive, like your Rampant Growth Cultivates. Those are the least offensive. And then they get scarier when you go up with like Tempt with Discovery, Archdruid's Charm, stuff like Archdruid's Charm. That's right. The ones that grab any land, those are obviously a lot worse. And then I think the only other like scarier, like they're bad for the format. Like I don't want you to have your Field of the Dead every game, stuff like that. So I guess the only other point about these narrow tutors that I think might be worth mentioning is that a lot of these, like, we talked about like Mystical Tutor and Sylvan Tutor and stuff like that, which are, very narrow, but are they too efficient? Because a lot of those are like one mana, 2 mana. Like they're very narrow, but like if you're playing Sylvan Tutor, you're playing a creature deck, and you probably have that situation where I talked about earlier, where you have 1 or 2 cards that you get this, you're very likely to win the game. Is there any argument that like maybe these are still not super great for the singleton formats just because of their efficiency?
I also think it depends on the player. Like, it just depends on how you as a player use them, how often you use them, how many decks you have that use them. I think they're definitely abusable, but as long as you're keeping a consistent level with your play group, I don't think it's a huge deal usually.
I think they're fine.
What about you, Jason?
I think they're fine? I think you're just being a baby.
I'm not being a baby. I want my singleton format to feel like singleton. That's all I'm saying. I want less consistency. I want less consistency in Commander. If I want consistency, I'm going to go play a competitive format.
If your play group is three people with precons, and you have 15 decks that all have Diabolic Tutor, it's not exactly... It's a little bit off there.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not necessarily putting a tutor in every single deck. Most of them, but not every single one. And I wouldn't say that. My mind is just kind of all over the place right now because you're talking.
I did it. We broke him.
You're talking about having less consistency in your decks, like in Commander games, but
so to me, the two things
we will often put redundancy into our Commander decks. That way, our game plans are ensured, and we are still able to do the same thing. So, how much of a difference does it really make if you are consistently getting your game plan off, even if it's with different cards?
Mm-hmm.
But like, how different is it really if you're able to just tutor up whichever one of those many cards that do the same thing is the best? Like, it's.
I think a lot.
Well, Jason, you also draw 80 cards a game, so you don't really need tutors. You're gonna see the same cards every time, anyways.
Not drawing cards. I'm not coming.
Yeah. Pause. I think in a lot of decks, you're right, Jason. I think in a lot of decks, in a lot of strategies, they're more or less the same thing. So I would agree with you there. But there is a big difference in, like, say, my Quasar deck, where the point is I want to draw cards and I want to draw a lot of cards. That's just a normal game mechanic that just happens over the course of a game. Excuse me. There's a difference between that and, say, like, oh gosh, bobbleheads. Just to come up with something random. Like, there's only, 7 of them, I think? So you want to make sure you find them. So there's a big difference between a normal game action that you can cram a bunch into your deck versus something that's a lot more narrow. So that's the difference between the redundancy and consistency thing, right? So I think in most decks, you're right. In most strategies, you're right. But there are times where it's not the same.
If you tutor up a bobblehead, I'm never going to be mad at you.
You go right ahead. For winning me the game.
That's what you say that until I tutor up the luck bobblehead and roll 6. Like, what is it? 7 6s in a row?
Yeah, and someone did the math on it, and it was not good odds. It's like 1
in 260,000.
Yeah, something like that. It's very unlikely. Now, if you loop infinite extra turns, now we talking, dog. You'll technically get there eventually.
I do think that those odds will work in my favor
Yeah, with Jason's luck, he'll get it every time.
every time.
That actually
Unless
probably
Morgan
is-
takes him out with the Temsies.
Yeah.
Sorry,
We broke him again.
Sorry, I PTSD.
War flashbacks.
Yeah, I could hear the bombs going off.
Oh God, it's so good. So the only other kind of tutor I thought was worth mentioning are the ones that do odd things. The most specific one that I could think of are these cards that like put ones into the graveyard, right? Like Entomb, Buried Alive, Final Parting. They're like, find a card, put them in your graveyard. All right. Now, obviously, these are like, Entomb specifically is like kind of a broken card because you're usually playing these kind of cards in graveyard decks or reanimator decks, something like that, right? Where it's like, I want this card, I want Wonder in my graveyard so my creatures have flying, or I'm going to reanimate It That Betrays on turn 2. I've done that before. It's pretty funny. It got removed on turn 3, so it didn't matter. What do you guys what do you guys think about these kind of tutors? Like, because if it goes to your hand, people don't play a lot of discard in Commander. Like, I know like Turgid exists and stuff like that, but we don't really see discard that much. So if you tutor something in your hand, right, it's probably safe. If you put it in your graveyard, at least there's, Deathrite Shamans and Bojuka Bogs and things like that could theoretically get rid of it. But are these just as good in a lot of the times?
This is very meta dependent. If your meta is good and plays enough graveyard hate, these are perfectly fine, not a big deal. If your playgroup is bad and doesn't run enough of those effects, then it's on your playgroup and you can abuse these all you want. Make them start building better decks.
First of all, I want to say I don't. First of all, I want to say that I don't really agree with the way that you put that, good playgroups or bad playgroups. I don't really think that that's the way that you should look at people's playgroups.
I was being hyperbolic, for example.
But I think that for the decks that want stuff in the graveyard or are going to pull stuff out of the graveyard, these tutors are better than, whatever it is that Demonic Tutor, Vampiric Tutor. In those decks, because it's so hard to interact with the graveyard without just specific cards that will target somebody's graveyard. It's not guaranteed that everybody at the table is going to be playing black so they can run Bojuka Bog. Not everyone's going to be playing Tormod's Crypt or anything like that. Not everybody's going to be playing white, so they're not necessarily going to have Farewell or have the option to exile graveyards. So once you get something out of your library and into your graveyard, if you have access to your graveyard, the card is almost protected.
So do you think it's more protected than your hand in some cases, or do you think it's about the same? Like, because like I said, like Demonic Tutor putting it in your hand, it's not technically safe. Someone could make you discard it, but it's just unlikely.
Well, here's the thing. If you're playing in a graveyard deck, it doesn't really matter if the card goes to your hand and you have to discard it. Doesn't really matter. You still have access to it. Now, outside of a deck where you can get access to your graveyard, get access to those cards and get them back, these are not very good. I don't know why you would be running them unless you have access to that. So, and I think that's another reason why I think that tutors are not bad for the format. Because in certain deck strategies, these cards are better than Demonic Tutor or Vampiric Tutor in a lot of cases. And nobody's talking about banning these because they're very narrow. I think it's because that Vampiric and Demonic Tutor, they can go into any deck that has black in it, and it immediately, if you had both Vampiric and Demonic Tutor to a deck, that's essentially 2 extra copies of any other card in your deck, if you want to think about it that way.
It's an extra copy or 2 of your best card. It's not always that, but that's cards. That's what a lot of it is.
Yeah. And with these tutors that put it into your graveyard, those can be better because unless you're have specific cards that will hate on someone's graveyard and, have them either in your hand or can get to them, this almost protects the card that the person is tutoring for.
Yeah. What about you, Preston?
I don't know. I really don't have a problem with these ones because it is niche which decks want them, and there are so many ways to mess with graveyards at this point. I think there's enough things that you can add to a deck to stop graveyard decks from being too strong.
Players responsible enough to run graveyard hate. I think the black players are running Bojuka Bog, but I think that's it, at least in a lot of casual pods. Unless, like if I played my Muldrotha deck more often, maybe people would be like, I got to put more graveyard hate in my deck. But I don't play my Muldrotha deck that often, so I don't know.
I don't know how often people are playing with graveyards, though.
You don't think Reanimator or graveyard decks? Isn't Muldrotha like one of the most popular commanders? Isn't Reanimator a somewhat popular theme?
No, I'm not saying it's not a popular theme, but Muldrotha might be one of the more popular commanders. But I'm thinking about how many of the popular commanders are can deal with recursion, or are at the very least in the colors that you could put recursion pieces in. And I'm just not thinking of a ton off the top of my head. I would really need to look at EDH Rec and see. But yeah, no, playing from the graveyard it's a really good way to build a deck. It's a good strategy to go with. I don't play against it a whole lot outside of really you, Morgan. You're really the main person that I know that plays out of the graveyard.
Yeah, I have a couple of graveyard decks, or decks that care about graveyards. So as we're wrapping this up, why don't we go ahead and, just to recap, let's take turns explaining our overall thoughts, just to summarize this whole thing. So I don't really like tutors in Commander. For me, there's two things that separate Commander from the rest of formats, or singleton formats in general, right? It's more casual, and you're taking advantage of the political aspect of it because it's multiplayer, because it's casual. And you have a lot less consistency. Like, those are two of the very defining characteristics of Commander for me. So I don't love open-ended tutors. I will sometimes run them, right? Like Diabolic Intent in a Sacrifice deck, probably good. Grim Tutor in my Life Swap deck, it's not good, but it's kind of funny. So there are situations where I do occasionally run open-ended tutors, but I don't love to. And if I can avoid it, or find another synergistic piece, or more card draw, I'd rather just do that. And then when we go into the very narrow tutors, it just kind of depends. I did run Mystical Tutor in an episode of Upkeep, and I didn't really love that I did that. And then I do run Land Ramp in my green decks because you just have to. If you don't, you're not playing green right. So I do that, but I kind of do it begrudgingly, if I'm being honest. Because it also takes time out of the game, right? Like, you want to make sure that your games are going along smoothly. And if you're shuffling your deck 12 extra times a game, that makes the games take a lot longer. So that's just a small thing to keep in mind, but it is something worth mentioning when you're playing these green decks that are tutoring every other turn. But overall, I don't dislike the more narrow tutors. Like, if you want to play the narrow tutors, that's fine. If you're, running like Enlightened Tutor in a Kaldra deck or something, that's funny. That's fine. You can do that. But I don't love open-ended tutors, but I sometimes will play them.
Yeah, so for me, I'm definitely not huge on the open-ended ones. I might run them sometimes, depending on the deck, but usually not. I actually tend to like the more narrow ones that help a certain theme. I'm usually a fan of a lot of them, except, of course, again, the ones that let you find any land, because I hate Field of the Dead.
Maybe we need to do a podcast episode that's justifying whether or not we need, like, another debate episode like we did Another land debate episode where we talk about whether or not Field of the Dead needs banned. That might be kind of funny. I feel like there'd be a lot of people on Preston's side. There's a lot of people like me who love Field of the Dead and don't want it banned, but like maybe it does. Jason, what are your final thoughts on tutors?
All right, my final thoughts on this are, I think tutors not only are fine for a casual format, but they also can add some interesting dynamics to games, because there's nothing in the rules that say you can't ask the table what you should tutor for. You know?
Well, sure.
And honestly, if you use them more as situational, answer this problem pieces, if you use them as, I need to catch up on mana, go find a soul ring or something, or I need to blow up this somebody's commander, go grab a removal spell, I need whatever. If you're using it like that, I think that they're fine. And if you're using them only to grab your win cons or your combo pieces, then you're playing CEDH, and it's fine there too. If you're doing that in casual, then you didn't plan on playing a casual game, and that's not the tutor's fault. I think that the open-ended ones are fine, but I definitely think that the narrow ones are cool, and it's always fun to see different cards synergize with decks in different ways. Like you were talking about Diabolic Intent. If sacrificing as the additional cost for that spell, if sacrificing triggered like 2 other things on your board, that type of stuff is cool.
That's kind of neat.
That type of stuff is cool. So I think that these are a lot more fun, and they're definitely more fair, but tutors overall, they're fine for casual commander if they're played casually. That's the, casual commander.
Yeah.
How do you feel about my Light Paws deck, Jason?
Well, you don't. That can't be played casually. It can't be. It can't. It's like Joyra. I can't play Joyra casual.
But see, here's the thing: the way you beat Light Paws is you keep him off of his mana. So that's why we need to normalize land destruction.
I think the way you beat Light Paws is you just keep destroying Light Paws. Just destroy Light Paws like as many times as it hits the like. If you can counter Light Paws, here, okay. I would do this. I would so absolutely do this just for the memes. I would counter Light Paws with a Pact of Negation, even if it means I have to die.
Just to send a message.
You're a bad person.
Even if it's like, all right, I'm going to be going into turn 4. I have 3 lands on the battlefield. I'm going to play Pact of Negation to counter Light Paws. See you, fellas.
You know what? The furries are on my side, and they're gonna yiff you.
Yeah, well, everyone else is on my side, and I think we got it.
Yeah, I think Jason wins that fight.
I think so.
Well, guys, that is our little bit of a discussion about what we think about tutors in singleton formats, making your decks a lot more consistent in casual. What are the ramifications of that? So those are some of our thoughts, and we don't necessarily see eye to eye on everything, and that's okay. That's what friends are for. We're here to challenge each other's thoughts, make each other smarter, stronger, give them some food for thought, and if we still don't agree, that's okay, because people don't have to agree on everything. But let us know what your thoughts are in the comments. We would love to know, are there specific tutors you like? Are there specific tutors you don't like? Are you all in? Are you all out? We'd love to know what the community thinks, so let us know in the comments. We have a little bit of time because Jason has some stuff he's going to need to cut out. Does anyone have something cool outside of the world of Magic they want to talk about?
I've been playing a lot of golf. Golf is fun.
Golf is cool.
I'm preparing myself for old age, when I'm retired, and this is the only thing that I can do.
It's the one sport you can keep up with.
Yeah, any sport that you can drink and eat food during, sign me up. So
bowling?
100%.
Hell yeah.
This is funny. This is kind of just out of nowhere. You just made me think of this. So, I matched with this girl on Tinder years ago, and she said that one of my pictures made me look like a professional bowler.
That is not a compliment.
Well, at first I was offended, and I wasn't sure what to say. But then I turned it around real quick, and I was like, "Did you just call me a professional athlete?"
Oh, Sly.
Oh, man,
Alrighty.
no one's ever told me that before. Thank you.
Well, guys, that's gonna that's gonna do it for this episode of Geek and Speak, the Geek and Speak podcast. We'll be back next week for another fun topic for Magic the Gathering. Stretch our brains and think about things outside of the box a smidge. We'll see you guys then. Bye.